Have you noticed that you're always the first person people run to when life gets hard, yet when you fall apart, the only shoulder you have to lean on is your own? You've become the safe place, the quiet listener, the one who steadies the chaos for everyone else. People thank you for your strength, admire your calm, rely on your kindness, but what they don't see is how heavy it feels to carry so many hearts inside one body. The exhaustion doesn't come from doing too much. It comes from never stopping long enough to feel your own pain. There's a loneliness that hides beneath being the reliable one. You keep holding space, offering comfort, giving advice. But some nights, when the noise fades, it's just you and the weight of unspoken fatigue. You wonder if anyone would notice if you stopped being the strong one for a while. If anyone would sit beside you, not for answers, but simply because you're tired. It's a quiet ache few will ever understand. And yet, if you're here, maybe you do. Tell me, when was the last time someone asked how you're really doing? And that's when something inside quietly asks, when did kindness start to hurt this much? Part 1. The weight of overcaring. Sometimes caring turns heavy not because love is wrong, but because fear sneaks into it. Fear of being called selfish. Fear of letting someone down. Fear that if we stop fixing people, they'll stop needing us. And if they stop needing us, maybe they'll stop loving us. In Buddhist teachings, that quiet ache is called attachment to the idea of being good. It's subtle, almost invisible. We build our identity around being kind, dependable, selfless. Every time someone says, "You're such a good person," it feeds us like a small spark of validation. But soon, we're no longer helping out of love. We're helping because we don't know who we are without it. And that's when compassion starts turning into suffering. When compassion lacks wisdom, it becomes a silent weight. You might recognize it by how your shoulders tighten when someone says, "I just need one more favor," or how your breath shortens when you see another message asking for advice. You care, but part of you also wants to disappear for a while. Think of how fog forms on glass. At first, it's barely there, just a soft mist. But as it thickens, the world outside blurs until all you see is your own reflection. That's what happens when caring turns into overcaring. You lose sight of the world beyond the fog of responsibility. You keep trying to clean someone else's window while your own grows opaque. Non-attachment doesn't mean detachment or coldness. It means clarity, the ability to tell where your care ends and another person's life begins. Even the best-intentioned love has a border. You can walk with someone, but you can't take their steps for them. You can hold a hand, but not their karma. When you forget this, love becomes control dressed as concern. There's a small moment, often missed, where genuine care shifts into quiet exhaustion. It happens somewhere between "I want to help" and "I can't stop helping." The next time you feel that twist in your stomach or that shallow breath, try not to fix it right away. Just notice it. Awareness is how mindfulness starts, by seeing what is, not what we wish it to be. Ask gently, "What here truly belongs to me?" That single question can soften the grip of guilt and bring a little space back into your body. Compassion with wisdom is a living boundary. It's like the invisible line that keeps a kite from tangling in the branches. It doesn't limit flight. It makes flight possible. When someone demands your constant presence, give yourself the space of an evening before you respond. Let silence do some of the listening. Often, quiet is the most healing form of support. Imagine a still lake at dawn. Every pebble you throw creates ripples. Throw too many, and the reflection disappears. Life works the same way. When you keep tossing yourself into everyone's problems, the water of your own mind can no longer mirror truth. Sometimes, The most compassionate act is to stand still at the shore and let the surface settle. Stillness isn't neglect, it's wisdom in motion. People often ask, if I stop carrying them, won't they fall? But carrying isn't saving. Letting go doesn't mean abandoning. It means trusting that others are capable of learning through their own experience. You can love deeply without holding so tightly. When you stop taking responsibility for everyone's happiness, you return that power to its rightful place inside them. That's where real emotional healing begins. Maybe tonight, while you pour yourself a cup of tea, let the steam rise and drift away. Watch it fade and quietly ask, what have I been holding so long it's already cooled? That small moment of noticing that pause is the path back to inner peace. It's not a lesson or a ritual. It's the gentle return to balance, to love without losing yourself, to help without heaviness, to care with the calm of a clear heart. Part 2. Compassion with boundaries. True compassion isn't about rescuing people. It's about understanding the invisible line between what is yours and what belongs to another soul. That line isn't a wall, it's a recognition of truth. You can stand beside someone in their suffering, but you cannot walk their entire path for them. It's the same reason one flame can light another, yet still cannot burn in its place. Every being must discover its own warmth, its own light, its own time to rise. When we forget this, love begins to suffocate. We start mistaking control for care, effort for empathy. In trying to protect others from pain, we unconsciously deny them the very lessons that shape their awakening. A parent who never lets a child fall also denies them the balance that only falling can teach. In Buddhist teachings, this is the essence of non-attachment: to care deeply without clinging, to love without the subtle fear of losing what you love. The practice of mindful awareness helps us sense the exact moment when compassion begins to tip into burden. You can often feel it not in grand gestures, but in small, quiet signals. A shallow breath that feels borrowed, the tightening in your chest when someone's emotions become louder than your own, that flicker of anxiety when you sense that their peace now depends entirely on you. Those moments aren't failures, they are invitations. The body whispers what the mind refuses to admit. This is the edge of your boundary. In that instant, pause. Not to pull away, but to return to balance. Let your awareness settle like dust floating down after a long wind. The pause itself is sacred. It resets the heart's rhythm. Sometimes all it takes is a single, slow breath. Not the kind that fixes things, but the kind that lets them be. Compassion with wisdom is like water finding its level. It moves around what it cannot move through. It nourishes without forcing growth. When you love with awareness, you no longer drown in another person's storm. You become the still surface beneath the rain, steady, present, reflecting, but not broken by every drop. This isn't coldness, it's clarity. To hold peace while others wrestle with their chaos is the highest form of care. It gives them a mirror of steadiness, something they can touch when the noise inside them gets too loud. You don't have to absorb their suffering to validate their pain. You only have to remain real, human, and calm enough for your presence to remind them of their own center. If you ever find yourself tangled in someone else's struggle, try noticing the sound around you: a fan humming, a clock ticking, a bird cutting through the air outside. Let that sound anchor you in the present moment. It's a simple way to return home to yourself. The world continues, life continues, and so do you. In that awareness, inner peace quietly reappears. Compassion with boundaries is not the rejection of love, but its purification. It's the transformation of care, from possession to presence. The Buddhist path teaches that every person carries their own karma, their own timing for growth. You can walk beside them, offer light, even share warmth. But the walking, the learning, the changing must be theirs. When we finally understand this, love stops being exhausting. It becomes space, vast, gentle, and free. And within that space, you don't lose yourself. You finally meet yourself. Part 3. The practice of letting go. Letting go isn't about turning your back on someone or abandoning what you care about. It's about loosening the invisible grip that tries to control what was never truly in your hands. In Buddhist teachings, this act isn't a retreat, but a recognition, a quiet bow to the truth that everything and everyone moves according to their own rhythm of karma. You can accompany another soul on their path, but you can't carry them to where they're meant to go. Real compassion with wisdom knows when presence is enough. To let go is to shift from clinging to clarity. The difference feels subtle but immense, like the air after rain, still damp, yet easier to breathe. Control is heavy. It weighs down the heart with the illusion of responsibility for every outcome. When we release that weight, inner peace begins to take root again. Not because life has become easier, but because we've stopped wrestling with what can't be held still. Think of how snow melts on a warm morning. It doesn't resist. It simply becomes what it was meant to be all along: water, movement, life. In the same way, letting go is not loss. It's transformation. The energy once locked in tension begins to flow again, quietly nourishing what was starved inside us. Every attachment we hold, whether it's to a person, an identity, or a specific result, creates a thread that tugs at our attention. Sometimes it's soft, like background noise. Sometimes it pulls so hard it blurs our sense of direction. Mindful awareness helps us notice those threads before they knot. The moment you realize your peace depends on something you can't control, that's your signal to soften the hand, to let air between your fingers. There's a kind of discipline in this softness. It's not weakness, it's intelligence of the heart. You begin to sense that your role is not to push life, but to align with it. When you trust the natural unfolding of things, you stop asking, "How do I make this work?" and start asking, "How can I stay true while this changes?" The second question opens space. The first one closes it. Letting go often feels like standing on the edge of what used to be home. The familiar pulls at you, a name, a routine, the comfort of fixing things. Yet underneath, there's a quiet knowing that what you're releasing isn't love, it's attachment. And when that distinction finally settles, peace arrives unannounced, like light filling a room you didn't realize had windows. If tonight feels heavy with thoughts or faces you can't stop replaying, take a moment not to meditate formally, but simply to acknowledge. Sit somewhere still and picture them as distant stars. You don't have to touch them, just notice how they shine on their own. Whisper softly in your mind, "May you find your way." It's not a ritual, it's a release. You're reminding both them and yourself that love doesn't need possession to exist. The beauty of letting go is that it turns guilt into gratitude. The energy once spent on control transforms into quiet respect for life's timing, for other people's choices, for the mystery that keeps unfolding beyond our sight. The heart that once clenched out of fear now opens, wide and still. Like a field after harvest, nothing left to prove, everything ready to grow again. And in that openness, compassion returns to its purest form, not a duty, not a sacrifice, but a gentle awareness that life moves best when we stop trying to hold it still. There's a certain peace that comes when you finally stop trying to hold everything together. When you realize it's not your job to save everyone, to fix every broken moment, to carry every storm on your shoulders, you start to see that love doesn't disappear when you let go. It simply becomes quieter, wiser, more honest. And in that quiet, Something inside you exhales for the first time in years. Maybe this is what freedom really feels like. Not the loud kind that looks like walking away, but the gentle kind that comes when your heart learns to stay soft without losing itself. You still care, but differently now. You can listen without absorbing, give without draining, love without clinging. You begin to trust that people have their own paths, their own timing, their own lessons, just as you have yours. So tonight, when the world slows down and that familiar heaviness creeps in, try not to fight it. Just sit with it. Let it speak. Let it breathe. And let it pass. Because even in your exhaustion, there's beauty in how much you've tried, and even greater beauty in your willingness to rest. If these words found you at the right time, maybe that's not an accident. Maybe you were meant to be reminded that your heart deserves the same compassion you give so freely to others. Stay here with me. There's more to explore, more to heal, more gentle truths waiting to be uncovered. Subscribe if you'd like to keep walking this quiet path together, not because you have to, but because somewhere inside, you already know you don't have to carry it all alone anymore.